What if one of the most overlooked aircraft of World War II secretly became one of its most impossible targets? Not the fastest plane, not the deadliest, and certainly not the one Germany believed in. In fact, military leaders thought it was a mistake, an expensive failure that barely deserved to fly. Its engines were unreliable, its combat record was embarrassing, and many believed its story was already over before the war had even truly begun. But hidden inside that failure was something nobody saw coming, a strange advantage that would turn this forgotten aircraft into a ghost in the sky, flying so high that enemy fighters could only watch helplessly from below. And when one pilot finally climbed high enough to challenge it, the result became the highest air battle of the entire war. This is the unbelievable story of the Junkers Ju-86, the aircraft nobody wanted until it became untouchable. The aircraft nobody wanted. Germany, 1934. Behind closed doors, the country was rebuilding its military power, quietly preparing for a conflict much bigger than anyone wanted to admit. The Air Ministry needed a modern bomber, fast, efficient, and flexible enough to serve both military and civilian purposes. Several manufacturers rushed forward with designs. On paper, one looked especially promising: the Ju-86. Its engineers made a bold gamble that set it apart from everything else in the sky. Instead of using a traditional gasoline engine, they chose diesel, an unusual and risky move for an aircraft meant for war. The promise sounded impressive: longer range, better fuel economy, more endurance in the air. It looked smart, modern, and even revolutionary. But once it actually flew, reality hit hard. The engines overheated. Oil disappeared at alarming rates. Performance dropped badly at higher altitudes. Reliability became a constant nightmare. Pilots never fully trusted it, and in combat, trust is everything. Then came the real test: the Spanish Civil War. This was supposed to be the Ju-86's chance to prove itself. Instead, it exposed every weakness. Mechanical failures piled up. Engines struggled in harsh conditions. Missions became unreliable. Meanwhile, rival aircraft were faster, tougher, and far more feared. Compared to them, the Ju-86 looked outdated almost overnight. To Germany's military leadership, the verdict was brutal. This aircraft had failed. Production slowed. Confidence collapsed. Many were sent away for secondary roles, training duty, or simply forgotten. For most people, the Ju-86's story ended there, a failed machine, left behind by history. But that wasn't the whole story, because hidden inside its biggest weakness was the very thing that would make it nearly impossible to stop: the failure that hid a secret. Most failed aircraft disappear quietly. The Junkers Ju-86 almost did, but a handful of engineers noticed something strange. Buried beneath its disappointing combat record was one unexpected advantage: its diesel engine behaved differently from traditional aircraft engines. While gasoline engines burned hot and struggled with extreme turbocharging, the Ju-86's diesel system produced cooler exhaust temperatures, creating fewer heat problems and making high-altitude boosting far more practical. At first, that detail seemed unimportant. Then everything changed. For years, Junkers engineers had been quietly experimenting with pressurized cabins technology so advanced that most military planners barely took it seriously. The idea sounded almost futuristic: seal the crew inside a controlled cabin, give them breathable air, and send the aircraft higher than pilots were ever meant to fly. Now combine that idea with a redesigned turbocharged diesel engine, and suddenly the failed bomber had a second life. Not as a bomber, not as a fighter, but as something far more dangerous. A machine built to operate where almost nobody could reach it. And once Germany realized what it had, the skies over Europe would never feel secure again. But what happened next left Britain watching helplessly. The ghost above Britain. When the new high-altitude version of the Junkers Ju-86 finally took flight, it looked less like a weapon and more like an experiment. It carried a tiny crew, almost no defensive protection, no heavy weapons, only cameras, specialized equipment, and one enormous advantage: altitude. Higher, higher, then higher still, past the reach of most anti-aircraft guns, past the operating ceiling of nearly every fighter in the sky. Soon, The aircraft was cruising above 12,000 meters, then pushing beyond 13,000 so high that the world below looked distant and unreal. From that impossible height, it photographed ports, airfields, troop movements, and supply routes across enemy territory. And there was almost nothing anyone could do. British radar could detect it clearly. Operators watched the blip move across their screens. Pilots were scrambled. Engines roared. Fighters climbed desperately toward the target and failed again and again. The air became too thin. Engines lost power. Aircraft struggled to gain altitude. Pilots fought exhaustion and lack of oxygen. The Ju-86 simply remained above them, silent, unreachable, untouchable. For Britain, it was more than a military problem. It was humiliation. An enemy aircraft flying wherever it wanted, while the Royal Air Force could only watch from below. And then Germany pushed its advantage one step too far. That's when outrage replaced embarrassment, the day Britain had enough. At first, the high-flying Junkers Ju-86 was used mainly for reconnaissance, quietly gathering intelligence from a height that made interception nearly impossible. That alone was dangerous. But then, Germany made a chilling decision: turn the ghost in the sky into a bomber. On paper, its attacks looked small. It could only carry a limited bomb load, hardly enough to compare with major bombing raids happening elsewhere in the war. But that wasn't what made it terrifying. What made it terrifying was simple. It always got through. No interception, no warning strike, no fighter response. Just a sudden bomb falling from an invisible aircraft far above the clouds. Then came the attack that changed everything. A Ju-86 dropped its payload over Bristol during one of the busiest times of day. Streets filled with civilians became scenes of chaos. Buildings shattered. Lives ended in seconds. Families who had nothing to do with the war became victims of a plane nobody could stop. Now, this wasn't just a technical embarrassment. Now, it was personal. Military leaders were furious. Pilots were furious. The public demanded answers. Britain could no longer afford to simply watch. Somewhere in the RAF, a dangerous idea began taking shape, an extreme plan that would send one pilot higher than fighters were ever designed to go, and challenge the untouchable ghost where almost no human could survive. Britain's impossible answer. Britain's response was desperate but brilliant. If no fighter in the sky could reach the Junkers Ju-86, then Britain would build one that could. At a secret RAF effort, engineers took one of their best fighters, the Supermarine Spitfire, and stripped it down to its bare essentials. Anything heavy was removed. Armor plating gone. Extra machine guns gone. Unnecessary equipment gone. Every kilogram mattered. Every tiny bit of drag mattered. The aircraft was polished, smooth, carefully refined to cut through the thin upper air with the least resistance possible. It became less of a fighter and more of a machine built for one impossible climb. Then came the pilot, Flight Officer Emanuel Golitsyn, a young flyer with nerves of steel and unusual discipline, trained for conditions almost no combat pilot had ever faced. Extreme altitude meant freezing temperatures, weak engine power, failing instruments, and dangerously low oxygen. At that height, even the human body starts shutting down. One mistake could mean blackout, or worse. Still, he climbed into the cockpit because somewhere high above Britain, the untouchable aircraft was coming again. And what happened next would become aviation history. The highest dogfight of the war. September 1942. Radar stations picked up a familiar contact crossing toward Britain high. Incredibly high. Golitsyn launched immediately. His specially modified Supermarine Spitfire clawed upward, meter by meter, climbing far beyond normal combat altitude. The air outside grew brutally cold. Frost began forming. Controls stiffened. The engine struggled for every breath of thin oxygen. Still, he kept climbing. Then, at the very edge of what his aircraft could do, he saw it. The Junkers Ju-86. Long wings. Strange silhouette, drifting like a phantom above the clouds. The German pilot spotted him almost immediately and reacted fast. He dropped his bomb load, then pushed his aircraft even higher, squeezing every last ounce of performance from engines already operating in near impossible conditions. But Golitsyn followed. Now both aircraft were fighting in a place that barely belonged to aviation at all, over 13,000 meters high, in freezing darkness. where machines failed easily and human survival itself became uncertain. Golitsyn fired. His shells struck. Then, disaster one cannon jammed. The uneven recoil threw off his aim. Moments later, ice and vapor blurred his vision. For a few terrifying seconds, he nearly lost control entirely. When visibility returned, the JAM-86 was disappearing into haze. No dramatic explosion, no fireball in the sky. But something important had changed. The untouchable aircraft had been touched badly. Later, it was revealed the damaged Ju-86 barely made it home, suffering severe wing damage and major engine trouble during its desperate descent. Its myth of invincibility was shattered, and with that, its era quietly came to an end. The aircraft that changed the future. The Junkers Ju-86 never became famous like legendary fighters or giant bombers of World War II. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't beloved, and it certainly wasn't built for greatness. It began as a disappointment, a machine many considered a mistake. Yet in failure, it revealed something revolutionary. Altitude itself could become a weapon. Not speed, not heavy guns, not armor. Height, distance, silence. The ability to see everything while remaining almost unreachable. That idea changed warfare forever. Years later, aircraft built around the same principle would dominate intelligence-gathering planes like the Lockheed U-2 soaring near the edge of space, and the legendary Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird racing higher and faster than anything built before it. And today, satellites silently do what the Ju-86 once proved was possible. Watch from above, beyond reach. Not bad for an aircraft its own country nearly threw away. A forgotten failure that quietly helped shape the future of surveillance, reconnaissance, and aerial warfare forever. So here's the question. If you had to choose, would you rather sit inside the Ju-86, high above the world, alone and nearly untouchable, or climb into that stripped-down Spitfire, pushing your body and machine to the absolute limit just for one chance to bring the ghost down?